Thank you, Mr Speaker, and it's a great privilege to be able to speak on this well-deserved and well-written motion by the member for Waite, and in particular speak of the horrors that this war would have had not only on the people of Australia but also across all parts of the world. It is, to my information, that there were nearly 40 million military and civilian casualties ranging from the age of 15 to 22, ranging from around 15 to 22 million deaths and about 23 million military personnel, ranking it among the deadliest conflicts in human history. In addition to the human casualties, approximately 8 million horses, mules and donkeys died during World War I alone. We cannot imagine the trauma and the grief that would have been experienced across the world, especially being at this time there were not the instant communication opportunities that we have here today. So the unknown and the worrying from the families and the mothers and the fathers and the brothers and that and the loved ones would have been absolutely terrifying. Australia had just become a federated nation and the population was around about 4 million. However, we had over 416,809 who enlisted for service, with this being around 38.7% of the total male population aged between 18 and 44. Of these, an estimated 58,961 died, 166,811 were wounded, 4,098 went missing or made prisoner of war, and 87,865 suffered sickness, and to my indication that would represent around 76% of the total of those volunteering. Of the 416,809 who enlisted or volunteered, there were 34,959 South Australians who were joined by 300 South Australian women in the Australian Army Nursing Service. Mr Speaker, we must always remember that due to two failed referendums on the issue of conscription, that meant that the war service in the Australian Imperial Forces depended on volunteers. Prime Minister W.M. Hughes favoured conscription, but South Australia joined New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland in voting no to the proposal in the referendum held in 1916 and 1917. These votes produced the necessary majority for enlistment to remain voluntary. Recruitment drives following the failure of the second referendum produced a temporary increase in recruits, but the referendum themselves proved decisive and counterproductive. In 1918, enlistments were well below target. Mr Speaker, one of the forgotten stories is how Port Pirie helped the war journey with a sizeable contribution during World War I, not just by the way individual men and women enlisted, but very importantly through an industrial capability and social support for the cause among non-combat residents, but also through the fact that 53% of all the Allied lead for the munitions expended in the war came from Port Pirie. By 1917, the Port Pirie smelter formed the one main source of supply of lead for all the Allies in Europe. Output had been increased from 74,000 tonnes in 1914 to more than 156,000 tonnes in 2000, up to that date there. Union delegates in Port Pirie and Broken Hill demanded better pay and conditions for workers, with the company capitalists reaping big benefits during the war. This was regarded in some circles as an insult to patriotism. At that time, the continuality of supply of lead for the Allies was in paramount importance. Threatening strike developments in Port Pirie was feared, for the barrier or the Broken Hill men were out on strike and making desperate efforts to get the Port Pirie workers out on strike with them. On the 21st of August 1917, William Robertson, General Manager of Port Pirie Smelters, made an impassioned appeal to the Unionists on the front page of the local newspaper, the Port Pirie Recorder, and also the North Western Mail. And, Mr Speaker, I will quote, "Should we, in Port Pirie, fail to supply the lead, history may declare that the greatest war of all times was lost, not on the blood-stained fields of Europe, but in Port Pirie, where well-paid, well-conditioned workmen failed to see the path of duty." An immunity from strikes ballot was favourably passed by members of the Australian Workers' Union, the largest union concerned, whether or not they favour an agreement which would give Port Pirie Smelter immunity from participation in any strike during the war in a vote of 4-1 against striking. The workers had refused to cease work, considering such action would have been detrimental to the best interests of the Empire at such a critical period of the war. The various unions at the smelter made their wartime collaboration official by attending a conference at BHP's headquarters in Melbourne, where they signed a pledge not to take any strike action for the duration of the war. The Prime Minister of the day, Billy Hughes, stated he was proud of the actions of the Port Pirie men. It should be stated, for the record, that at the height of the crisis, the Broken Hill Associated Smelters Proprietary Limited management had received many offers from women who wished to work and keep the munition supply going. Many women also asserted themselves in demonstrations, having relatives at the front whose lives depended upon the continuation supply of the necessary munitions to beat down the attacks of the enemy. By war's end, the smelter men of Port Pirie had supplied more than 53% of the total Allied war effort in lead, which I consider a remarkable achievement. My community is very proud of the sacrifice not only the volunteers from Port Pirie suffered and their families, but all people across our great nation and their families for the sacrifices they made to enable us today to enjoy our great freedom and lifestyle. To remember those who made the great sacrifice, our community has a very well presented RSL. We also have great memories from all the various conflicts, plus from our memorial drive, where commemorations have been established for all conflicts from the Boer War right up to current activities for all services, and the recent Remembrance Day was a great indication of the commitment from our community, where the schools, private, both and public, came to represent there and lay wreaths, and also the community themselves were very, very supportive at that one, as the member for Hammond indicated. He indicated he went to some of the services. I went to the Port Pirie one because of the distance involved. You can only travel prevented me from going to Port Augusta, but I made an apology for that. Mr. Speaker, my family have had my late uncle, my dad, my late brother and my younger brother all served in the Defence Forces. And I'm very proud, even though I wasn't in the Defence Force as such, I am a veteran and served in the Army Reserve for nearly 10 years, and very, very proud of my family's history in volunteering or conscripting for services to protect our nation. Mr. Speaker, I also had the great privilege to see my granddaughter, Shay, speak at the Anzac Day service last year. And this year, my grandson, Jax, officiated at his Risdon Park Primary School service, where he facilitated the program, and he also emceed the program there. And then he also had the great opportunity to lay a wreath at the Remembrance Day service at Port Pirie this last Monday. Again, I want to acknowledge all the RSL clubs across all of South Australia. I want to acknowledge a legacy also about how they've looked after the widows, looked after the families and things like that. But in general, this was a war that really, I don't think we need to have any wars. But however, I'm very proud, and this is where Australians got their name. They're represented, they're bigger, they're great fighting strength and things like that. And as with other members of this House here, I am very proud of our returned service organisations out there. I am paid tribute to those who have served in the Defence Forces, no matter whether they be the Navy, the Air Force or the Army, and also Allied Engineering Service and so forth. But also, at the end of the day, is that I pay tribute to them and also to the current serving people across all of our nation here, and look forward to attending more commemorative service in the future, lest we forget.